everybody. I think we can all identify with this. Sometimes in life, Nick, you need a break. We're college professors. If you're a parent, if you're a student, if you were a student, everybody gets a spring break. We're coming off spring break. But you, my friend, are on location. I am in Lakeland, Florida. Where are you right now?
I am on the eastern side of Kauai right now in Hawaii.
Beautiful.
So yeah, I'm about 6 hours behind, but I tell you, I'm rocking a killer tan and I'm ready to go. Hold on one second.
I would say that's winning right now, but we've only done a handful of these podcasts, Nick. I got to say, I've gotten some feedback from our loyal viewers, and one of them sent me this shirt based on my takes compared to yours. And they think I should wear this because clearly I've been the winner so far.
Okay. Yeah. Normally, I tell you what, mainland Nick Nugent would be very upset at that shirt, but Hawaii Nick Nugent is just going to do like this real quick and just go with the flow. Not even worry about it. I'm in a good mood. Come at me, man. Brother, no problem. We're all good.
What's been the highlight of Hawaii so far, despite the tan and the shirt you have?
I'll tell you what, man. We did a whale watching trip yesterday that was out of control. Saw about a dozen whales. Had them breach right next to the boat. Got amazing videos. A lot of sea turtles, a lot of animals. Just fantastic. Great family time.
You're a multi-sport athlete. You play football and hockey and a lot of sports. Do you surf at all?
Barely. I think I caught a couple waves, but my son and my daughter did some surfing lessons, and they had a blast. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. A lot of good waves, a lot of fun.
See, Nick, I was an elite swimmer back in high school, so I could definitely translate that to being a great surfer. I'm a man of the water, my friend.
I look at you and I see you in an office building with those boring blinds behind you, and I say, that is a man of the water. That's the first three words that come to mind. First four words, man of the water. Mike Neighbors, man of the water.
Just call me Aquaman, my friend, and we will move forward. I'm very jealous of you right now, but I don't think you got this from our loyal fans, but I did. So I'm going to wear this proudly just for this podcast because you know what? When you podcast and we go back and forth, you got to earn it every time, my friend. We got to earn this every time. And let's go to our menu because we have a lot to get to in our podcast. We're going to have our 4 starters segment in just a bit, but we're going to talk about meaningless sports events for our opening segment. We're going to go to heart of the order. A lot of new baseball rules, Nick Nugent. We're going to break that down. Our final 5. We all have disappointing athletes. Now, there are different layers to this, but we'll break down most disappointing athletes. And our last words, our rant, if you will, at the end. But let's start with our 4 starters. Meaningless sports events. I'll get this going. One is recently, we try to keep this podcast topical. I used to love covering the NFL Combine because I got paid for it, and it was fun interacting with NFL coaches you didn't normally get to talk to because they're busy during the season. The NFL Combine is ridiculous. It's a broken record. How many times are we going to hear this? He has the measurables, but he's not a good NFL player. I mean, Anthony Richardson was mediocre at best at the University of Florida. All these reports because he jumps really high and he has a great workout, has the measurables, he's moving up the charts. How many times are we going to see this? It's not a good ending for the measurable guys, Nick Nugent. That's my leadoff. I think the Combine is useless. I want to watch the tape of these guys. I would lean on pro days more, one-on-one interviews. I don't know how you feel, but that's my first one. The NFL Combine, very meaningless for me.
I agree. It's watching people work out. There's no need for it. I don't care how fast you can run when nobody's coming at you. Throwing up, 25 bench presses means nothing. It's about how you perform in the game. No question about it. My opening one is simple. NBA slam dunk contests used to be one of the coolest things around when I was a kid, and I think that they've done every dunk you could possibly do now. So there is no more new dunks. There are no more new dunks, and even the one this year. Mac McClung, won that NBA contest, the NBA dunk contest, and it was cool to see him do it because he's kind of coming from a viral YouTube star to becoming an NBA nobody to kind of making something happen. But NBA dunk contest, boring. I don't want any part of it anymore.
Along those lines, I agree with that 100%. I almost look at the NBA slam dunk contest. They need to make it like American Idol. We need to start recruiting, basketball players all over the country, because it's clear these NBA elite guys aren't going to participate, like the Major League Baseball home run derby, where, heck, even last year, Albert Pujols on his last legs as a player participated. That's why, to me, Major League Baseball's All-Star Weekend is the best, because at least these guys play in these specialty competitions too. The Pro Bowl is meaningless. They just can't figure this out. It was a flag football game for years. Now, officially, the Pro Bowl is flag football. I wish I sat higher so you could see this, Nick, because I'm very proud of this shirt. But the Pro Bowl, let's just make it a skills competition. I would rather see guys, quarterbacks compete, running backs compete, wide receivers compete in skill competitions. I know there's some of that. Let's just put that center stage. I have no interest in the Pro Bowl when it was unofficially flag football, but now it is officially flag football, meaningless to me.
Yeah, I agree. Boring. I mean, I like the skills competition. I think the flag competition is not what I'm paying to watch, or I don't want to go see that with my family. It's boring as hell. I'm going to tell you right now, this is with every sport, every professional draft. I think the professional draft is exciting to be aware of. I can't wait to see where people end up on the board. But to sit there and watch people sit around a table with their family, and by the way, now it's different. Everyone nowadays just stares at their phone. They just stare at their phone, and then when they don't get selected, they stare at their phone again. They wear these absurd suits. And I'm talking about every professional draft. Not interested. Don't want to be a part of it. Just let me know who drafts who when it happens. Then I'll get ready for the regular year.
See, that's where we disagree. I love the NFL draft. I love Mel Kiper. I love the anticipation, because unlike college basketball, I actually got to know these players. They weren't one and done. I've seen them play for a couple of years. I have somewhat of a vested interest because I cover the New Orleans Saints. I want to see who they pick. I love the drama of it. I love the fact that most of us are wrong about it. Even though Mel Kiper is wrong most of the time, I love the fact, and you should appreciate this, Dr. Nugent, a man who does his research. Mel Kiper does his research. He can't predict the unpredictability of the NFL draft, but man, I love the NFL draft. But my last one, I go back to the NFL. I used to cover training camp a lot more. I love covering training camp because inevitably you would have a player come out of nowhere and be a story, especially on a team that there are not many roster spots. I love following those stories, but preseason football, in this Twitterverse age that we're in, people get all excited about it. There's always these heroes in preseason football. Either they don't make the team or they're not going to play. Meaningless. You want to see progress. The starters barely play. Heck, these days the quarterbacks barely play at all if you're a starting quarterback in the NFL. I love the NFL. I love football. But preseason football, especially because they're going to eventually add another game, it's going to be 18 games. It's 3 games now. Make it 2 games. And these games are, I know we get excited because football's back, but it's meaningless to me.
I got to be honest. I'm with you. All 3. 100. I agree 100%. Love all 3. This one's probably going to make a few people upset here, but I'm going to go with college bowl season. Now, obviously, the final few games I love, but I'm talking about the ridiculous bowl games, the Lending Tree Bowl, Southern Miss, 38, Rice, 24, the Myrtle Beach Bowl. That's a real exciting name, the Myrtle Beach Bowl. Sounds like a tourism flag football game. Marshall over UConn. How exciting. And then how about the Camellia Bowl? Buffalo over Georgia Southern. Did you know that for the Camellia Bowl, did you know that Buffalo and Georgia Southern didn't even have football teams this year? When they found out they made the bowl game, they had to get a couple fraternities to get some people together, get some equipment, and then play the game. I think these college bowl games are out of control. In a few years, we'll have 50 games, and it'll be the Nick Nugent, it'll be the Neighbors and Nugent Potato Bowl, and it'll be just absolute nonsense. Enough of them. I'm tired of it.
And I agree with you. And I'm agreeing with you so much, you may get one of these next week from our audience. I used to love the Poulon Weed Eater Bowl. That was one of my favorites. But a lot of these bowl organizers, they should embrace the playoffs because it would make what they're doing more meaningful. I've never understood that. For years, Bobby Bowden and Joe Paterno, liked the bowl system and didn't want the playoffs. Bobby Bowden missed a lot of potential playoffs if they would have had him back in the day because his kickers were horrible. They're kicking the ball wide right. I tell my students this all the time. Their kids will ask them one day, why did they have all these bowl games? Why didn't they have a 12-team playoff? You mean they used to judge the college football champion by a 14 playoff? What's going on there? That's kind of a sneak preview to my rant and comparing March Madness to college football, but it's archaic that we're in 2023 and we have these bowl games. And Nick, I agree, you shouldn't just get a bowl bid because your record's over 500. It's ridiculous. It really is.
Exactly. Completely agree.
All right, let's move on to the heart of the order. I like the fact that we touched on some different subjects there. Speaking of different subjects, the Major League Baseball season about to start. I know you and I are big baseball guys. You can say what you want about Rob Manfred, what kind of leader he is, but I will give him credit for instituting change because Major League Baseball has not evolved like the other sports, but they have some rules in place. And let's break this down a little bit. Obviously, the pitch timer is big. They're getting rid of the shift. The bases are bigger. What stands out for you? We'll kind of break these down. But a lot of new baseball rules. I'm going to give you my opinion over all of this, but I want to get kind of your opinion. What stands out about all these rules for you?
First of all, I'm a big fan of the defensive shift. To make that illegal is just idiotic to me. I think if you want to beat the shift, just learn how to bunt or learn how to hit the opposite way. Ask Tony Gwynn, ask Wade Boggs, ask Pete Rose. They made an absolute career out of going the other way. You get these guys coming into that Major League Baseball now who only want to rip it and pull it, and then they know now with the defensive shift rules. And by the way, they've already found out ways to beat this defensive shift with people going in the outfield in certain directions. So what they thought would be a complete fix is not a complete fix. They've just reattacked the way on how to beat this defensive shift issue. So I think that is a wasted rule. I wish they didn't do that one. Pitch clock, I'm a big fan of the pitch clock, the new system for that, except for the idea that a game could end because a pitcher took three too many seconds. I think that's a little bit ridiculous. So I would like to see something where it goes pitch clock rules stay in effect, the new ones stay in effect throughout the game, and then maybe the last inning they go away, or you get some kind of an extension. I know if you give an extension, then it will just kind of bring it to the next level, but the whole idea that you could have a game end on more common box, or that in a big game with a runner on first and the pitcher's trying to hold them on, you can only kind of go over there twice and then something else is going to happen like a balk. It just takes away the love of the game. I love speeding it up. I love baseball just as much as the next guy, but the idea of speeding up this fast and having games end on more balks and taking too much time either in the batting, either in the right near the plate or on the mound, that's just not okay with me.
Do you play the ukulele?
I don't. Should I though?
I feel like we should have some ukulele music while you're telling me all this. I
like it.
Yeah, we're taping this very early, so you get extra points for being a warrior, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate
that. Our time zones are very separate right now. We're taping this early. What time is it there right now?
Right now, 5:25.
Wow. You're an early riser, but that's extremely early. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to baseball, my friend. I don't like too much change. I want change when it's merited, but baseball's finally gotten to a point where the offensive numbers are just way down. It's feast or famine. They're hitting home runs or they're striking out. And the speed of the game, especially with this younger audience where, much of this generation can't even watch full games when they're fast. They wake up in the morning, they just want to see highlights. Baseball had to make a change, Nick. So obviously the pitch timer is very good all around. And in spring training so far, it's gotten rave reviews. We're going to have less pickoff moves, less time with guys in the batter's box warming up. Let's get right to the action. And I think that's great for baseball. I will, before I get into my rest, I want to bring you back in. I know you're a big fan of umpires. If we ever got to a point where we did not have umpires and it was just automatic calls, because actually Major League Baseball would have to really reveal itself and explain what exactly the strike zone is, because every umpire has their rendition of it. I think would you be in favor of just getting rid of umpires and taking it a step further and maybe speeding up the game more? Or is this a good happy medium right now?
Out. Umpires, out. There's some sports where you need them, but baseball's not one of them. Out. No umpires. Nobody.
I teed you up on that one, didn't I?
Yeah, that was too easy for me. In fact, any rule that gives more power to the umpires is something that I'm against. I think they have too much power now. It's all about them. I want no more umpires in baseball. Done. Out. Automatic strike zone, timers, no umpires.
And you know what? No more arguments. They can't argue with the the machines here. So that would cut down on time too. I like that part of the game, but I'm kind of mixed on that. I would like to that be a good spring training experiment. I don't think the umpires would like that experiment, but I'm all about the pitch timer. I think it's time for baseball to move on a little bit. One area we didn't touch on, the larger stolen bases, from 15 inches to 18 inches. And at first I was wondering why they were doing this, but there's two components to it. Obviously now with the bigger base, it's, narrows the baseline. So it's easier in theory to steal a base, but it's also safer for the players too. I don't see a negative with this, Nick. I want to see more stolen bases. I mean, you and I loved baseball growing up back in the day where they didn't change teams every year and we got to know teams, but there were a lot of guys back then. I mean, I'm dating myself with the Vince Colemans and the Ricky Hendersons, before that, the Lou Brocks, the Tim Raines. There was always that marquee stolen base guy. We've lost that in baseball. I wonder if just expanding bases a little bit by a few inches will truly bring that back and help things. How do you feel about this one?
I'm disappointed in you. Yeah. You've disappointed me several times in the first few episodes, but this one right here is bad. The very idea that you want to make it easier for people to steal bases. So you don't want people to get better. You want to make it easier. That's sad to hear. I think this is one of the most ridiculous rules I've ever heard of in any sport. It's almost like they were at the winter meetings and, they have their rules committee and they said, all right, we got to think of 3 new rules. We only have 2. We only got about an hour left in the meetings. So we got to come up with a third. Then someone says, how about this? How about we make the bases bigger? And then someone said, do I have a second? Someone raises a second. Anybody, any discussion? No. All in favor, say aye. And then they just said, all right, sounds good to me. Let's go to Cheesecake Factory for happy hour. It's almost like that's how they made the rule for the extra size on the base. It makes no sense. This whole idea of reducing injuries. How many people are hurting themselves on bases? Is that something that's a huge deal in baseball? Is it like 5 times a game or watching the Red Sox versus Yankees, and then we lose another player to a busted ankle? There's just no reason for it. It's a wasted rule. I want to see more stolen bases, but I want to see people be able to read pitches better. And by the way, the new pitch clock rule will help people steal bases because people can't go over nonstop over the time. I want you to study your pitchers. I don't want you to be lazy. I want you to get faster, and I want you to make it a strategy. Ricky Henderson made it an art form. He just wasn't lucky, and he did it with small bases. Could you imagine? I mean, it's just it's foolish.
A part of me, there are times in your life when people say I'm disappointed in you. When you use disappointed, it kind of hits me at a gut level a little bit. I don't think it, this may be the most damning statement you've said since I said I don't like apple pie and you were disappointed in me. You said I wasn't an American, a proud American. I will say this. I understand that baseball has to evolve, but here's the thing. It's a different game now, Nick. If we're going to have more action in terms of stolen bases, we gotta mix it up a little bit. I'm not all in on this pitch timer, but if it's going to improve baseball, a game that I love, I have to be for this. I have to want this to evolve because if the youngsters of the next generation is bored with it, we're going to lose baseball. It's not going to be the same. It's going to go in the atmosphere somewhere. So the pitch timer is a necessity, I think, to keep the younger generation's attention. And if we can get more stolen basers out there, I'm going to call them stolen basers, I'm all for it. I want more action. I don't want home run, strikeout. We're sitting watching a guy mess around in the batter's box for a half hour, watching a million pickoff moves, all that stuff. The one problem I have, and you touched on this, is the shift. And the fact that they're getting rid of the shift, it just is a lesson in life. Sometimes people dare to be different. The Rays dared to be different under Joe Madden. They created the shift. Everybody laughed at him at first, just like the opening starter. What are these guys doing? Then everybody did it. It's a lesson in life. Trust your gut. Dare to be different. The fact the Rays were trendsetters, they changed baseball, and I agree with you. Tony Gwynn, Wade Boggs, they would get around the shift. But that's just not the way baseball is now. So we have to adjust just like the bases. But isn't it amazing, though, how many people laughed at the Rays for the shift and the opening starter? And Joe Madden would have these crazy trips where all the players would dress up on the road. Not that everything he did was spot on, but to me, it's a lesson in life, Nick Nugent, because we are professors helping the younger generation, that it's okay to put yourself out there and have confidence that maybe the changes that I'm putting out there will be good. And it's crazy just a few years later when you look at the scheme of things in baseball that we're already changing the shift. It's remarkable to me.
I agree. And you know what? Since you made the connection between life and baseball, I'm no longer disappointed. Those were harsh words. That's not how we do things in the islands. So I want to make sure that I take that back. I withdraw my statement. It was, I jumped on you too quickly. I'm not disappointed.
Once again, that's how I roll, baby.
I understand.
Well, I think we touched on it. It'll be interesting to see how the Major League Baseball season trends moving forward. I think they're going to have some bumps in the road, but I applaud you, Major League Baseball. We all have to evolve a little bit. We all have to change and pivot, so to speak. Let's move on to our final five. I think everybody's going to enjoy this because there's all kinds of different answers. And speaking of disappointing, I've been disappointed in some athletes' careers over the years. Good segue, right, Nick? You didn't even plan that. We're going to segue to disappointing.
To be honest, that was pretty good.
Okay.
I mean, you're on today. There's no denying it. This is probably your top effort so far.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Who were your most disappointing athletes? We're going to go back and forth. We love to have the final five. You know, I know many of you like lists. You know, we like to debate lists a little bit. I'll give the floor to you, my friend. You're already winning in Hawaii, but we're going to have our five most disappointing athletes, and this could be based on effort, based on circumstance, different kinds of disappointment. You know, maybe something personally happened. We're not judging here. We would have liked to have seen the whole body of work if everything would have worked out. I'm going to frame it like that, okay? So there's all different kinds of criteria. You're going to go first, our five most disappointing athletes.
All right, no problem. I'm going to start off Johnny Manziel. I loved him in college football, man. I was so excited for him to come out. And I know it doesn't always happen where the college football quarterback makes it at the big time, but I just felt like he could do it. I felt like he was so fast and so exciting. And I felt like he had courage to do what other quarterbacks did not have courage to do on the field. And I was really, really looking forward to seeing what he could do on the big stage. And obviously that did not work out. So I feel like that was an easy one for me right off the bat.
Well, that's why I went Mr. Miyagi early a couple of weeks ago when we had our favorite coaches in movies, because I tried to be polite and let you go first. Manziel was my first as well. I've never seen a more exciting player in person play college football. The things that he could do and the fact that he did them so early. And this guy wasn't a five-star recruit coming out of high school. He breaks all the stereotypes. When he beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and he'll admit this to this day, it changed his life forever. In this social media age with camera phones, instant celebrities, it changed Johnny Manziel. But even after all his hijinks in college, I mean, he was a party guy. He didn't hurt anybody. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'll learn from that, work hard, and be a good NFL quarterback, but it didn't happen. It was very disappointing. I'm gonna do Manziel as well for my first one because I have so much to say. When we were talking about this subject, I immediately put his name down, and that's what's great about this podcast, Nick, is we don't have pre-show meetings. I have no idea what you're going to say. You don't know what I'm going to say. But boy, Johnny Manziel, if things would have gone to plan and he would have worked hard, and he'll admit it to this day, I'll give him credit for that. I didn't want it bad enough. He didn't want to work like a Tom Brady. He didn't want to work like a Drew Brees or a lot of these guys who are overachievers in a lot of ways. I mean, some of these quarterbacks we'll get to, I'm sure, later on this list, if you have a few, have a lot of talent, and they didn't work hard. Guys like Brees and Brady had to squeeze every bit of talent and work hard, and Manziel wasn't willing to do that, and it's a shame because, boy, I agree. You never knew what you were getting from Johnny Manziel in a football game, and he was fun to watch. Very disappointing. All right, number two for you.
Number two for me, Zion Williamson. I know it may be too early to say this, but it's been years now. I mean, when did he get drafted in 2019? Yeah. He's been around the league for a few years, and I feel like he hasn't done anything. And I think that he made an all-rookie team, and he made an all-star team. But I think that's just because of his name. He really has not done anything. He's amazing. He's a fantastic player. He's kind of one of those players that made me excited to watch basketball again. And I feel that, obviously injuries has just adjusted that. So it's not his fault. I'm certainly not against him. He hasn't disappointed me personally, but it's just a matter of, man, I was so excited to watch what he could do in the NBA. I felt like he could come in as a rookie and dominate. And I don't mean do well as a rookie. I mean do well as an NBA player. This guy was just an absolute machine. And maybe he will end up being that machine, but to only play in, a few handful of games, it feels like, I know he's played in more than that, but it feels like he's been a non-factor now for 4 years. It's 2023 happened. He was drafted, 4 years ago. I think it's crazy to think what he could have been if he was healthy. And who knows if those injuries will ever stop.
Just the outlier that he is as an athlete, to be that big and to have that skill set, you just wonder if he's ever going to get past it. And the hard part for the New Orleans Pelicans, Nick, is if he's on, they're up there with any team in the NBA right now. They really are, especially in the Western Conference that's so incredibly tough. But it's not through lack of effort. That's why when we put, 5 most disappointments on our list, there's all different kinds of criteria for this. I'm going to venture in a place I think you may be surprised. And it wasn't Andy Roddick. Now, I'll look back at tennis in our country, and if John McEnroe would have played when Andy Roddick played, yeah, we would have had fun with him because he would have yelled at officials and entertained us a little bit, and we would have mocked him. Boy, in the social media era, can you imagine John McEnroe playing when Andy Roddick did? But Andy Roddick had to play the same time as Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, and Roger Federer. He didn't have a chance. I mean, he was a good player, but, to be a great player, you got to play in the right era sometimes. If Andy Roddick, Nick, as I bring you back in, if he would have played in the 80s, I think Andy Roddick maybe is better than McEnroe. We never will know this.
Yeah, he was on my extended list. I could have used him. I like that answer a lot. He was exciting, and you can't blame him. He was trying hard. He obviously worked at his craft. Those professional tennis players are just top-notch athletes. Maybe even more so than elite swimmers back in the day. I might venture to guess. But I will say that. but yeah, no, I'm the same way. I was an Andy Roddick fan. I felt bad. You go against 3 of the greatest of all time in your prime, and that's just tough to do. So I'm sure he's saying the same thing you are. Why couldn't I be born 10 years earlier? It would have been a lot different. I agree.
How about you keep going? That's my number 2. I guess you have your number 3 now.
All right, my number 3. I'm going to go one with one that you probably won't have on your list. This is going to be a little bit bizarre, but I'll tell you why. I've been a fan of the UFC since the beginning. I can remember watching the early UFC fights. I'm talking about the first few where they had to fight multiple times in one night. We used to watch them on the way to hockey games to get all fired up. And there was a guy who went viral when going viral wasn't possible, and his name was Kimbo Slice. Kimbo Slice came on the scene. And he was a machine. He was a monster. He would beat up people in backyards, and he went, crazy viral for what he would do, not on the UFC mat. And then when he decided to go into the UFC, personally, I thought that it was going to be the most exciting thing to happen in sports for a long time. I thought he was going to go not only undefeated, but I thought he was going to kill people in the ring. I thought the cops were going to come out and arrest him for how many people he would murder in the ring. And it just didn't happen. It kind of showed me how amazing of a sport UFC is. It kind of showed me it's more of a science than an art form in some ways. But he was one of those guys when he came on. People my age, we were really excited to see what he could do, and he didn't do much. And that was surprising. I was wildly disappointed in him not going crazy in the UFC.
Anytime I can say Kimbo Slice, I just smile. I love the name.
I know, absolutely.
Not a big UFC fan, but I love the fact that we're bringing all kinds of sports here. I'm going to bring kind of a somber disappointment, and I mean this earnestly, that we didn't get to see his whole career. And I mentioned that there are different layers to the players that we're talking about. But how about Len Bias, who obviously tragically died of a drug overdose right after he was drafted with the Boston Celtics. And that Celtics team was loaded. I mean, they had Larry Bird, they had Kevin McHale, they had Dennis Johnson. If Len Bias was with that team in an era where we had the Lakers and we had Michael Jordan and the Bulls, it would have made that era even more exciting. Of course, I don't want to leave out the Detroit Pistons, the Bad Boys, but boy, what a tragic end to a career. And Len Bias, people rave about his career at the University of Maryland, how much potential he had. And it's rare that a team that was as good as the Boston Celtics in the 80s would get a player that caliber, just making the strong even stronger. So Len Bias, how about that? I mean, if we could have saw that career, 80s basketball was great, Nick, but you add Len Bias, that's disappointing we didn't get to see that, obviously.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in my former neck of the woods in New England who felt he would be, the next big thing of all time, top 10, top 5 players of all time. You still say the words Len Bias around Boston, and they're gonna, really get sad about it. It's It was very sad. A little bit older generation, but it was he could have just been fantastic. My next choice, not necessarily what he did on the field, on the playing field or on the course per se, but just some decisions that he made. I'm going to go with Tiger Woods.
Wow.
Tiger Woods certainly did not disappoint in terms of championships or victories, but obviously he made. I love to golf. I'm a big fan of golf, and I am certainly a big fan of Tiger Woods on the course. But as a person, he's obviously made so many questionable decisions that it's just sad to see. And the damage he did to the brand, the damage he did to Nike Golf, the damage he did to all his fans around the world was amazing when he chose to kind of live life a little bit differently and borderline be a scumbag for a few years. It was just awful to see. It was it hurt his persona, it hurt his brand, and he's bounced back. And his real true fans still love him a lot and will follow him around the course. But man, I think that it affected him physically, it affected him emotionally, it affected his overall level of greatness for years to come. So definitely disappointed in him as he went through being a professional athlete.
That's an interesting call. I like to think about this all the time, that there's a lot of athletes I've enjoyed covering. But frankly, Nick, we don't know these athletes. We don't know them. We can interview them. We can read about them. We can watch them play. And I'm not trying to pass on any judgment here. But we had this one image of Tiger Woods for so many years, and then he veered off a little bit in different situations. We don't know these athletes. We don't. There's a lot of athletes, frankly, we can look at it the other way, that we think this certain bad image about them, and maybe they've been misunderstood a little bit. So I can see your points. That those points are well taken. I'm gonna go back to the NFL because, boy, I really like watching this player play. And if he hadn't had problems off the field, I think he may have gone down as easily a top 5 quarterback of all time as Michael Vick. I know Michael Vick was drafted number 1 overall, and ironically, the Falcons traded with the San Diego Chargers, and that was a good win-win because the Chargers got a pick, drafted Danian Tomlinson, and they got Drew Brees in the second round. But Michael Vick was a quarterback. We hadn't seen anything like that before because, you have your quarterbacks who can move around the pocket, but Michael Vick was an excellent passer. I mean, an accurate passer. He could do it all. Obviously, they made video games after him. We hadn't seen anything like that. He had the dogfighting scandal in the prime of his career, had to go to jail. But one of the best games I ever saw, I wish I could pull up the stats, is when he had his second football life with the Philadelphia Eagles. He had a first half, and I can't even remember who they played. But I'm watching it thinking, boy, what a waste. Because he missed his prime. He was in prison. I'm not sure how many years he'll have left. Michael Vick's not a Hall of Famer, Nick Nugent. Michael Vick should have been one of the top 5 talents we've ever seen in the NFL, but because of mistakes and missteps he had in his career, obviously it's an unknown of how good he could have become if he would have had his head on straight. It's apples and oranges with Johnny Manziel a little bit. But, kudos to Michael Vick for rebounding later in his life, and he's had a broadcasting career. He's turned things around in his personal life, seemingly so. I don't pretend to know these guys, but how about Michael Vick? What do you think of that?
I think it's a great choice. I obviously, he made some major mistakes. There are a few things you can't, you do in the world, and hurting dogs is certainly one of them. And I'm certainly not making light of it. It was sad to see. But the point is that he should have gone down as one of the greatest athletes of all time. Not one of the greatest football players of all time, but one of the greatest athletes. If he had stayed, true and clean the whole time and not made any mistakes, I think you're right. I think at the end of his career, we're talking about him as the greatest of all time. I mean, I don't mean greatest football player. I mean greatest of all time, up there with, O.J. Simpson, Deion Sanders, just unbelievable athletes that could do it all. He was so much fun to watch. Electric, absolutely electric. I love it. My last choice is a little bit different. Didn't necessarily fall apart at the seams. Didn't spend major time in jail. Didn't have any major crises. But I'm going to go with Tony Romo. I've always been kind of a side fan of the Cowboys, as I would think most level-headed football fans are. They get a lot of attention. They're on TV a lot growing up. I was a big fan of Tony Romo. I love the way he threw the ball. I love his pocket presence. I always thought that he would, do something great and win a few Super Bowls. And it was just sad to not see him be one of the best. I think he had one of the tools. He certainly had the teams to really, really step it up, and to not have him reach that pinnacle was certainly wildly disappointing. Obviously, he's doing just fine. He's still looking good. He's still standing tall. He's still doing well with broadcasting. But overall, I would consider his career a disappointment in the eyes of Cowboys fans.
You talked about this in an earlier podcast because I retain information from Nick Nugent that one of the biggest or one of the worst calls was the Dez Bryant non-catch. How would Tony Romo's career be different if they ruled that a catch? It would have been interesting.
Well, we'll see. I mean, you never know if they go on to win the game, of course. But, yeah, I mean, I think it changes the direction a little bit. I mean, you just and those things happen all the time. I mean, how would Matt Ryan's Hall of Fame resume look if his – and, by the way, people who get on him for blowing a 28-3 lead, he didn't blow anything. He didn't blow anything. He played fantastic. The offensive coordinator blew that lead, and the defense blew the lead. But I think that if he throws, one more touchdown in that game, or they score one more time, or they hold them, and by the way, the Patriots had to get lucky. I'm a Patriots fan, but they had to get lucky to win that game too. But I think sometimes it's one play, the Dez Bryant catch, the first down in the fourth quarter, and your whole life changes. But yeah, I feel it's a little bit disappointing for me.
All right, I'm going to round out my top five. I'm going to give you my fifth, but I have an honorable mention. He was a huge bust, but we had an experience where I'm going to cut him some slack because I like the way he handled it. I'm going to stick with Goff. You touched on Tiger Woods. I'm going to bring Goff back. John Daly. I love John Daly. He is something the PGA Tour needs. That's personality. They don't have a lot of personality. A lot of guys who mix it up a little bit. But John Daly obviously doesn't have the diet or doesn't have the workout routine that's suitable for somebody who wants to play at a high level. I think maybe things came too easy for John Daly and Nick Nugent. It was just too easy. He could naturally hit a golf ball a country mile, and he had an unbelievable game and an unbelievable story how he barely makes the cut or barely makes the field at the PGA Championship and wins, and then his career was off and rolling. He's become kind of a cult hero among golfers. It's funny seeing him and his get up he looks like you on the golf course, frankly. Sometimes with the Hawaiian shirt, standing next to Tiger Woods, who is buttoned up Nike. I think John Daly's been great for the PGA Tour, but how do you feel if he would have adhered to a better routine? I would have loved to have seen John Daly compete and be even better for the PGA Tour.
I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think he would have been any better. I think he would have been worse. I think if he had spent more time in the gym and more time drinking water and less time drinking Diet Coke and more time eating protein bars and less time smoking cigarettes, I think he would have been a worse athlete. I think when he played his best is when he was waking up after a long night, pounding a couple Diet Cokes, a Snickers bar, and a cigarette, and just teeing off, for a big PGA tournament. That being said, I'm a huge John Daly fan. I think he was great for golf. The ESPN 30 for 30 hit it hard with John Daly is one of their best 30 for 30s. I'm a big John Daly fan. I think you're right. I think I would have loved to see more out of him. He's just a character, and now we get to see more of him with his son. His son is a heck of a golfer too. So, but I'm a big John Daly fan. So I love that you brought him on the list. Good job.
That's why this list is fun. I'm glad you're not disappointed in that pick.
No, not at all.
To me, John Daly is one of those guys I like to hang out with. I think he'd have great stories. I think he would be fun. He doesn't take himself too seriously like a lot of these PGA guys, like the Masters, whatever. PGA just needs to just lighten up a little bit, and he was good in terms of that. I'm going to give you an honorable mention real quick, and let me know if you have an honorable mention, but Ryan Leaf. Obviously, you can make a case along with Jamarcus Russell, the biggest bust in NFL draft history. For those who can't remember Ryan Leaf, he came out in the draft the same year as Peyton Manning, and NFL scouts will say this. A lot of them thought that he would have a better career than Peyton Manning, but Ryan Leaf was a huge bust, and the iconic image of Ryan Leaf is in the locker room in San Diego with the Chargers yelling at a print reporter, "Knock it off!" When he came to Tampa, I took him aside and I said, "Hey, can we kind of have some fun? I know this is a new start for you." PR guys went nuts with us with the Bucks, by the way. I said, "Can you yell at me like you yell at that San Diego reporter, and then kind of put your arm around me? We'll laugh about it." He's like, "I love it." PR guys were like, they couldn't believe he said that. So it was funny that we did the skit, and he yelled at me just like that reporter in the locker room, and then he hugged me. And then that week I was working for Fox Sports Net. Jim Rome was doing a national show. They had their best of that week. and he included that stand-up, but he cut off the part where he was hugging me. They made Leaf look bad twice. So I will never forget you, Ryan Leaf. I saw him this fall in the press box, and we talked about that. He actually remembered it this past fall. I will always give Ryan Leaf that moment. Didn't take himself too seriously, could laugh at his mistakes. So he's my honorable mention. You have an honorable mention at all?
I do, absolutely. That's a great. I love Ryan Leaf. I think that now that I heard that story, that's the first time I've heard it. It makes me feel bad because he could have had a moment where he was seen in a little bit better light, and they took it away from him again. Mine's a little bit different. Growing up, I loved swimming, and I was a big fan of swimming. And
Were you an elite swimmer?
My biggest disappointment is a former elite swimmer. Who could have made himself into a Olympic gold medalist, but ended up doing podcasts with Nick Nugent in 2023. So I'm going to go with Mike Neighbors, former elite swimmer. Number 6, honorable mention for my disappointing athletes.
I came this close to being all Space Coast, all conference. I was swimmer of the week a couple times, but not quite all conference. Not quite.
Do we have pictures and or video? Because that's something that I would appreciate.
I will show you pictures when you get back from your vacation. Do you want to see pictures of me in a Speedo, though? That's the question.
That's not where I was going. I was talking about your elite athletic performance. That's what I was talking about.
Okay, just throwing it out there. All right, that's our final 5. Let's get into our rants. Because he is in Hawaii, because he's Mr. Big Shot, I'm going to let Nugent go first. Nugent, do you know who Don Ho is, that famous Hawaiian musician? You look – what's the Don? We should put some Don Ho music on this. By the way, before we get going, he doesn't know we're going to do this. I'm going to call him our truth teller. I'm going to bring in our producer, Justin Thomas. I think this will be a fun aspect, and we got to have some spontaneity to this podcast. Justin, could you join us for a second? You've heard us do all these segments. I have been the winner. Just your broad view of who has won so far before we give our final rants. Who do you think?
Why does there have to be a winner and a loser, Mike?
Because we talk sports, there's always a winner or loser. There's always a winner or loser.
I will say y'all all had some great picks. I thought the best pick, though, honestly, sorry, Nick, but I think it was Mike with Mike Vick. I think Mike Vick could have been amazing. I remember as growing up as a Saints fan, I hated watching him, especially when he played against the Saints, but he was so electric to watch. I mean, what he could do with his legs was amazing. And the fact that he had his career cut short, spent years away from the game, came back. That game, Mike, you're talking about, I remember watching that game. I believe it was against the Giants. That game was amazing. I think they had 28 points or 35 points in the first half. It was insane. They just, Mike Vick looked unstoppable and looked like the old Mike Vick. But I think I'm going to go with Mike Neighbors on this one.
I'll give you that. It's a great pick. Fantastic pick.
I'm not disappointed in you, Justin. We got to wrap this up. Our final rants. Let's do it, Nick Nugent. What are you ranting about in this podcast?
Mine's a quick one, actually. It's very simple. There's talk now about some of the professional hockey leagues trying to get away from fighting. And there's belief in some of the experts and some of the people in the hockey world that the NHL will look into this very seriously and potentially take fighting out of the game. I could go off on a rant for this for a long time, but I'll keep it quickly. It's part of the game. It's part of the things that bring people to hockey games. It brings non-hockey fans into the game itself. I think it's crazy that it's one of the major sports that allows fighting, but it does. And to take it away would be disastrous for the game of hockey, just in terms of attention and fan loyalty. I think it'd be a bad idea. I was never a big fighter. I love to hit, and I was physical, but I was never a big fighter. But there are people who make their living in the NHL, being the enforcers of the league and enforcers for their team. But this is more of an idea for bringing fans into the game. It's exciting. It's safe. People who don't get hurt when they're fighting, I know it seems like they probably would, but they don't. They get hurt in other ways of the game. This would be a bad idea to bring fighting out of the NHL.
You're a lover, not a fighter, aren't you?
I'm a lover, not a fighter. I mean, how could you not tell? Look at this tan, look at this shirt, look at these lays. I mean, come on, that's beautiful.
I'm just giving you some love. I agree. Some sports need to evolve, and some sports need to keep things the same. And fighting is a part of hockey. It's a part of why people like hockey too. It's fiber, important part of the sport in a lot of ways. I'm going to talk about evolving, though, in my final rant. And I mentioned it earlier on about, you talked about the bowl games. I cannot wait till we have a 12-team playoff in college football. You finally woke up, college football. As much as I wanted college football to expand, I don't want March Madness to change too much. It started at 16 teams, then it went to 32, then to 64, and it went to 64 in 1985. Nick Nugent was like 3 back then. I was a junior in high school and elite swimmer back in 1985. I was killing it in 1985. But a lot's happened since 1985. I want it to stay the same, though. If you're not one of the 64 best teams in college basketball, you shouldn't get in. And I know the NCAA is changing, Nick, with name, image, and likeness and transfer portal and all this stuff. But we got to keep March Madness the same. I don't think it will, though. I'm hearing rumblings because these conferences know they have more power because the NCAA less and less matters, that they may graduate this to 90 teams. Come on. Let's don't ruin something good. Just like fighting in hockey, Nick, I don't want March Madness to expand. I love the Cinderella. I just don't want this to happen. I don't know how you feel about this.
I love it. Great take. Might be your best take yet, which is saying a lot. But not only that, but it actually looks good. 64 teams looks good coming together. It looks good on the bracket. I'm the same way. I think there's, when it comes to that kind of stuff, there's no need to evolve. I am going to start calling you Uncle Rico, though, because you have said a couple things today that makes me think you got to let it go, man. One, obviously, is I used to be an elite swimmer, but the other thing is I was killing it in 1985 is an amazing statement to make. So, yeah, your new name now is Uncle Rico, Uncle Rico and Nugent podcast.
Were you 4 years old? Were you 4 years old in 1985? How old were you in 1985?
I was 5, man. I was killing it. I was killing it as a 5-year-old. I was knocking them dead.
Oh, I get reminders of how old I am. This is pretty crazy. Well, listen, I always have fun with these podcasts with you, but I really give you props for taking time out of your Hawaiian vacation. Maybe Justin could kick us out with some Don Ho, and we'll really get the feel. I am envious of you, my friend, because Hawaii is unbelievable. You're having fun, though, right?
Great time. Love it. Trip of a lifetime. Fantastic.
All right. Well, he is Nick Nugent. I am Mike Neighbors. Mr. Truth Teller Justin Thomas is our producer who said, I am the winner. But are we really shocked? I'm always winning, just like 1985. That is another Neighbors and Nugent podcast. Until next time. Oh, by the way, who's going to win it all in March Madness?
I got UConn.
I have Duke. We'll see what happens. Until next time, thanks for checking in. Please subscribe to our podcast. We have many more coming up, and let us know your takes as well. We're very interested. We like to spur debate in these podcasts, but we'll see you down the road.
Beautiful Kauai.